Hey everyone, welcome. Today we're going to dive into two really fascinating chapters from the Book of Numbers. They lay out some pretty wild ancient laws on everything from public health to marital drama. Plus, we'll get into one of the most intense personal vows a person could possibly take, a complete and total dedication of their life to God. So, you might look at this and think, jealousy, haircuts, and wine. What on earth can these seemingly random ancient rules really tell us about big ideas like justice and personal devotion? Well, as we're about to see, it's all way more connected than you might think.
All right, let's jump right in. First up, we've got the rules for community justice. The main goal here was to establish a real sense of purity and order within the Israelite camp, which they saw as a holy community.
You know, the first rule we run into is basically an ancient public health measure. It's like an early form of quarantine. To stop diseases from spreading, anyone who was sick had to live outside the main camp. But, and this is super important, it wasn't a life sentence. The law made it really clear this was temporary. Priests would actually check in on them, and as soon as they were healed, they were welcomed right back into the community.
The text also gives a super clear roadmap for how to make things right if you wronged somebody. And just saying sorry wasn't nearly enough. It was a whole two-step deal. First, you had to publicly confess what you did. Then second, you had to pay the victim back in full, plus an extra 20% on top as a penalty. But what if the person you wronged had passed away and they didn't have any family to receive the payment? Well, the law even had a plan for that. In that case, the payment was made to God, which in practice meant it was given to the priest. The core principle was simple. A wrong had to be made right no matter what. No loopholes.
Okay, now we're shifting to one of the most complex and, let's be honest, controversial parts of this entire chapter. It's a pretty unique ritual that was designed to resolve a husband's intense suspicion of his wife's adultery, especially when there was zero evidence or any witnesses.
This whole thing was called the law of jealousy, and it was treated like a formal, divine judicial process. An accused wife was brought before the priest, who would then lead this sacred ritual. It involved her taking an oath and then drinking something called bitter water, which was a mix of holy water and dust from the tabernacle floor, all to figure out if she was innocent or guilty.
Now, this is a really vital piece of context. The source material presents this law not so much as a punishment, but more as a protective measure. I mean, think about it. In a society where a woman was extremely vulnerable to her husband's rage based on suspicion alone, this law gave her a formal, public way to clear her name and, hopefully, protect her from violence.
The trial had two very, very different outcomes. If the woman was guilty, the text says she would suffer some kind of physical problem, a divine sign of her guilt. But if she was innocent, the water would do absolutely nothing to her. Her innocence would be proven right then and there, in public, freeing her from all the suspicion.
This brings up a pretty obvious question, right? One that the source material even asks itself. Why was there this specific law to test a wife's suspected infidelity, but nothing like it for a husband?
And the answer it gives is that the law's main goal was to protect the more vulnerable person in the scenario. The focus was all on clearing a wife's name and shielding her from the very real danger of domestic violence that could be fueled by suspicion. That being said, the source is clear. If infidelity was actually proven for either a man or a woman, the punishment was exactly the same.
All right, so now the focus totally shifts. We're moving away from laws about community problems and into this intense, voluntary vow of personal dedication to God. This was called the vow of the Nazirite.
So what does Nazirite even mean? It comes from the Hebrew word nasir, which means to be separated or consecrated. So a Nazirite was someone who took this special vow to separate themselves from worldly things in order to be completely dedicated to God.
So what did this vow actually look like in real life?
It was marked by three really distinct and very visible signs. First, no wine or anything made from grapes. No juice, no raisins, nothing. Second, you couldn't cut your hair for the entire time you were under the vow. And third, you had to avoid any contact with the dead, even if it was your closest family member.
And this is brilliant because it shows these weren't just random rules. Nope, each one had a deep symbolic meaning. Avoiding grape products was all about rejecting worldly pleasures, to find your joy only in God. The long hair, that was a constant visible sign to everyone of your commitment. And staying away from dead bodies symbolized a separation from sin and death, so you could be dedicated to God, the source of all life.
This vow was also surprisingly flexible. A person could take it for a specific, limited time, like say 30 days, or they could commit to it for their entire life. It could be a choice an adult made for themselves, or it could be a vow that parents made for their child.
And this wasn't just some theory either. We have some pretty famous examples in the Bible. The source points to Samson, right? His incredible strength was tied to his long Nazirite hair. Then there's the prophet Samuel, a whole family clan called the Rechabites, and even John the Baptist in the New Testament.
And after going through all these intense laws and vows, the chapter finishes by shifting to this incredibly profound and beautiful blessing that was meant for the entire nation of Israel. This is the famous Aaronic blessing. The priests were given these exact words to speak over the people. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Just beautiful.
Did you notice the pattern in that blessing? The name Lord is said exactly 3 times across those 3 lines. That structure is totally on purpose, and according to the source we're looking at, it is just packed with theological meaning. The source material we're using offers a specifically Christian interpretation of this structure. It connects the 3-part blessing to the concept of the Trinity. So the first line, about blessing and keeping, is seen as God the Father. The second part, about grace, is connected to God the Son. And the third part, about peace, is linked to the Holy Spirit.
But really, the main takeaway here is that even though a priest is the one speaking the words, the blessing itself comes straight from God. It's this powerful declaration of God's own character and his desire to give his people 3 crucial things: protection, grace, and peace.
And that leaves us with a final question to chew on. From these laws designed to protect the vulnerable, to vows of extreme personal devotion, to a declaration of divine blessing, how do you think these ancient ideas of justice, devotion, and grace continue to echo and influence our world today? Something to think about. Thanks for watching.